Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I used to live in Savannah, Georgia. I lived there from 2014 to 2016. My wife is a Charleston girl, so we would drive home to Charleston almost every weekend. And it became very clear to me that we had to move to Charleston. So in 2016, we moved to Charleston, and I was in practice there up until very recently. And I'm going to tell you the story about how my practice changed because my life changed. And I think as a medical doctor, when you find something that affects your own life in a very powerful, beneficial way, like you really have no choice. You have to share that with your patients. And you feel compelled to do that. And so I was compelled to do that. And I really didn't think that I would ever be standing in front of a room of people talking about this kind of stuff. This was just the way that I took care of my patients, and it was an approach that I took, and it was a desire to learn more about the power of diet and lifestyle. And so today I want to relay that information onto you. And I guess I would start by asking the question, raise your hands if you like having fun. Okay. I'm pretty sure all the hands went up, and if one of you didn't, who is this person? Raise your hands if you enjoy dancing. That's a lot of hands. That's awesome. Raise your hands if you enjoy spending time with your kids and your grandkids or the people that you love. I want to help you accomplish these things. That's what we're going to talk about today, which is the power of fiber, which is like the most underrated thing. This is me. This is me in 2012, so 10 years ago. I'm 32 years old, and I weigh 240 pounds. And I had high blood pressure. I had high cholesterol. I am a highly accomplished medical doctor. I went to medical school at Georgetown. I was chief medical resident at Northwestern. Went to the University of North Carolina. I was on a grant from the NIH. All the things that I was trying to accomplish professionally, I was able to do. And yet, I was miserable. I was in seriously, I was in a horrible place. Extremely anxious, depressed. There were a lot of days where I would just literally roll up under a blanket in a dark room, and I just wanted to be left alone. And I would watch Bravo shows, trash shows. And this is me in 40, all right? This is me in my 40s. And what changed between what you see on the left and what you see on the right is the power of plants. I changed my diet. I tried, when I was in my 30s, I tried to exercise my way out of the hole that I was in, like a typical early 30s guy. So I would go to the gym for 45 minutes to an hour, 6 days a week, and then I would get on the treadmill or I would jump in the pool and swim. And I did not lose weight. I got stronger, I got faster, but I did not lose weight. I did not fix my medical issues. And it was actually meeting my wife who ate a plant-based diet, and she never asked me to change anything. But I saw the way that she looked. I saw how happy she was. I saw how much she enjoyed her food and how satisfying it was for her. And here I was, and I just wanted to feel better. And so it started with a smoothie. That was it. And I felt so much better. It was like I had finally found exactly what I needed. And because I felt so well, so much better, that I just wanted to feel good again the next day. So I went back and I did it again. I'm curious, do we have people in the room who are not plant-based currently? Anyone? Amazing. I'm so glad that you're here, because you are the people I want to talk to, okay? Because honestly, if you're already plant-based, look, there's tweaks, there's things that I got for you, don't worry. But the people who are not eating plant-based, this is the moment I want to talk to you. So it's amazing that you can feel like you're reverse aging. And So I wish in 2012, I wish I had known these things, but I'm glad that these transformations took place in my life because it allowed me to start to relay this information to other people, including what we're doing today. And fiber is my topic. I'm actually very shocked that I get to be the guy who talks about fiber, because if you start digging into the science, which I'm going to show you, I'm like, how is there no one talking about this? It's overwhelming. Literally, in all of nutrition, this is the only thing that everyone agrees on, is that fiber is good for you. But the problem is that, number one, we are not eating fiber as a country. So if you look, this is the average American's diet, the standard American diet. And what we're seeing here is 4% of their calories come from whole grains. 98% of people are deficient in whole grain intake. 11% of their calories come from whole food, plant-based, so fruits, vegetables, whole grain, seeds, nuts, and legumes. Any guesses on the number one plant in this diet? What's the number one plant? Potatoes. It's potatoes, because they're eating French fries. All right, 30%, this is animal products. So meat, dairy, eggs. What is the fiber content of this 30% right here? Zero. We don't need any calculator to figure that out. And then 55% of our calories, sadly, come from food that did not exist for our grandparents. It literally didn't exist. So the average fiber intake in the United States is 17 grams per day. The average recommended amount for a woman is 21 to 25 grams per day. And the average for a man is on the range of 35 to 38 grams per day. And when we do studies, it's appalling when we do studies in the United States and look at fiber intake, because the typical strategy in these studies is you look at high fiber consumers and you compare them to low fiber consumers. And in these studies, the high fiber consumers are eating 21 grams of fiber per day. So even the high fiber consumers are deficient in fiber relative to the minimal amount that we're supposed to be getting. So the second thing is that fiber is poorly understood. I see people, even academics, who will stand at nutrition conferences and say that there is no human need for fiber. And that is completely insane to me. And I'm going to show you the evidence that I would use to argue against that today. But the third thing is that most think it's boring, which is really sad. Most of us, at least me, my vision of fiber for the majority of my life is that it was the orange drink that my grandma stirred so she could poop. It worked. But that's the way that most people see it. I think fiber is sexy. I think health is sexy, right? I think making choices that make us feel great and feel vibrant and alive and energized and look great and radiant, that's sexy. And that's why fiber is sexy. And I'm going to start off with my favorite fiber study of all time. This is published in The Lancet, which is one of the top medical journals on the planet, by Professor Andrew Reynolds. This was published in 2019. Now, it's important to understand the context here. He's not looking at super sick people. He's looking at reasonably healthy people, sort of the average that you would expect in the United States, or maybe even a little bit healthier than the average person in the United States. And he's looking to see what is the effect of fiber. And what he's doing here is using a series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So basically what this means from a research perspective is that there's no bias, there's no cheating. You don't get to cherry pick the study that says what you want it to say. You're going to take all of the available information and you're going to pull it all together into one place, and then you're going to analyze it together to get answers, right? By compiling all the data. And so what he did is he pulled together 185 prospective studies that capture 135 million person years of data. Think about that. So we, as humans, have existed on this planet for 3 million years. So he is capturing more than 40 times the entirety of human history in one study. He also has 58 clinical trials that he's analyzing. So when we think about evidence, like people will present evidence, but many times what they will present, because they're trying to make a point, is they'll present like their anecdote, like this is what happened with this one person, right? So it'll be like a case report, or they'll do like an animal study. These are at the bottom, the weakest versions of science that exist. At the absolute top of the pyramid, the strongest science that exists is the science I'm about to show you, which are meta-analyses and systematic reviews, because we're compiling this great high-quality data and we're putting it into one place. So this is the absolute top of the scientific pyramid. And here's what they found. So looking at mortality, people live longer when they consume more fiber. Looking at death from heart disease, that's our #1 killer. Less likely to die from heart disease. Looking at coronary heart disease incidence, meaning having a heart attack. Less likely to have a heart attack when you consume more fiber. Looking at having a stroke, that's our number, I think 5, I believe #5 killer. Less likely to have a stroke when you eat more fiber. Looking at the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, that's I believe our #7 killer. Less likely to be diagnosed with diabetes when you consume more fiber. Colorectal cancer, this is the #2 cause of cancer death in America. There's only one cancer that's more deadly than this. Less likely to be diagnosed with colorectal cancer when you consume more fiber. Death from cancer, that's our #2 cause of death. Less likely to die from cancer when you consume more fiber. Interestingly, there was what we call a dose response. What that means is that as you add more fiber, you get more benefit. So whether it is living longer or, oops, sorry about that, living longer or having a heart attack or type 2 diabetes or colorectal cancer, when you consume more fiber, you are less likely to have those issues. And they also looked at clinical trials, and people who consume more fiber in clinical trials, they lose weight, they lower their cholesterol, they lower their blood pressure. By the way, they've since studied this in people that have diabetes. If you have diabetes, you lower your hemoglobin A1C when you have diabetes. If you have a history of heart disease, you will lower your blood pressure, you will lower your cholesterol, and you will be less likely to have a heart attack by consuming more fiber. So the bottom line is that in the largest study of dietary fiber in human health, look at the benefits that we receive. How is this not on the nightly news every single night when 95% of Americans are not consuming enough fiber? And this is all I have to say. I'm done with this conversation. Like, this is, thank you. I actually have more. So I want to show you how this works, because like there's this perception that fiber just goes in the mouth and anyway. Fiber is complicated. Fiber is very complicated. So complicated, believe it or not, that like great biochemists, they get very easily overwhelmed by fiber. They look at something like this, and they're just like, I don't know what to call that. Just call it fiber, and let's like make it soluble or insoluble. So that's kind of what's happened, is they've broken it into 2 major categories of fiber. But fiber is not hard to find. It's actually incredibly simple. All plants contain fiber. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, and legumes. And by the way, mushrooms have fiber. Mushrooms are honorary plants. We're counting them in our club, because they're not technically plants, they're fungi, but they have fiber, so we're going to count them. All right, so all plants contain fiber. Only plants and mushrooms contain fiber. All right, this is why animal product consumption, total intake, 0 grams. So to make it simple, they classify it into insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is the roughage, and soluble fiber is the kind that, like, if you took soluble fiber and you put it into your morning coffee and you stir, which by the way, this is something I do all the time, it will dissolve. It will disappear. You won't know that it's in there. It was like completely incognito. So with regard to the insoluble fiber, the way that this works is that basically you consume the insoluble fiber, it goes in your mouth, and it's sort of like sweeping its way through your intestines, and then basically it launches out the other side like a torpedo. This is the technical way that this works, coming from a gastroenterologist. But on the flip side, soluble fiber is completely different, and like this is the part where it gets really exciting for me, because soluble fiber is the preferred food for your gut microbes. So these microbes, they are amazing. There are 38 trillion of them. Look at that number. Look at that number. 38 trillion microbes, made up of a mix, mostly bacteria, but also fungi and potentially parasites. There's this one that's called blastocystis that we thought was a parasite for the longest time. And we're like, oh, got to get rid of that blastocystis. And actually research that I've been involved with at Zoe, we've discovered it's incredibly healthy. You want the blastocystis. So these microbes, they can really do things to enhance your health. And so if you think about this number, 38 trillion, it's quite fascinating because we only have about 30 trillion human cells. So that means you are less than 50% human. And if you were to, if you were to look at this in terms of genetic code, human genetic code is actually incredibly simple. It's like kind of shocking. Like there's like creatures that, like worms and stuff like that have a more complicated genetic code than we do. And if you were to look at the human genetic code, believe it or not, 99.5% of your genetic code comes from microbes. So you are less than 1% human, according to your genetic code. But that probably explains, to be completely honest, why you can take identical twins and have different results, right? Because identical twins carry the same genetic code. They don't necessarily have the same outcomes in life, and that's because they can have a different microbiome. In fact, our research shows that twins only share about 25% of the same microbes. So, and
doesn't that mean that if you ate something different, you could change your genetic code?
yes, you can, and there's a number of ways that you could do that. You can change your microbiome in less than 24 hours. So the dietary choices that you make today, nothing against the cake's great, but the choices that you make today will start to be reflected in your microbiome by tomorrow, and we have evidence to prove that. And also, in addition to your microbial genetic code, there's also things called, there's something called epigenetics, where it's almost like your genetic code is like a switchboard, and you can turn those switches on or off. And those switches are actually being flipped throughout the day. And it's the food that you eat that has a massive impact on that. So, yeah, there's a number of ways that we can impact our genetic code. These microbes, while we wait for that to warm up, so the science around these microbes is quite fascinating. We didn't know much about them. This is part of the issue that existed. We didn't have the technology to really understand them. It used to be like when I was in medical school that in order to, in order to test a bacteria, you would get a culture plate. And the culture plate was like the technique that was used for decades. And the problem is that you can't grow these microbes on a culture plate. They just will not do that because they have a characteristic, which is that they're called anaerobic. That means that if you expose them to oxygen, they can't survive. So within our colon, these microbes thrive because that's the type of environment where they do really well. So we needed a new technology. So in 2006, that's when they really developed the technology that we needed for the first time in order to actually understand these microbes and start to study this. So 2006 was the first sort of realization of like what we had inside of us. That's effectively what's happened in the last 20 years. We've discovered more than 30,000 different species of microbes. We're finding new ones all the time. And we're still trying to figure out exactly what all of them do. But at the same time, we went through a period of time where we were really just kind of describing what we were seeing on the scientific side. Like this is, hey, look, here's the pattern. That's interesting. We're now moving into a phase where this is actually being used in cancer care. A quick example, in melanoma research at MD Anderson, one of the top cancer centers in America. They noticed that people were not responding to immunotherapy, which is the modern approach to treating melanoma. Melanoma, by the way, is the most deadly skin cancer. So they noticed that immunotherapy was not working as well in people who received antibiotics. So that made them very curious. So what they tried is doing a fecal transplant. And the fecal transplant is where you give a new microbiome to a person. And they discovered that these people that were failing cancer therapy, a very large percentage of them survived after receiving a fecal transplant. And so then they went and they studied the impact of dietary fiber, and they discovered that for every 5 grams of fiber that you add to your diet, your likelihood of survival increased if you have melanoma by like literally 20%. It was unbelievable. So this is where this is starting to like really have an effect. So biodiversity is a really important concept here, because we have this really truly an ecosystem, this ecosystem that lives inside you, mostly focused inside of your colon, and it's made up of all these different microbes. And the way in which we look at an ecosystem, whether it is the Great Barrier Reef or the Amazon rainforest or literally the inside of your colon, we think about biodiversity. Because when there's biodiversity, all these different organisms, they are resilient and they lean on one another in order to have their strength. And when you reduce that biodiversity, such as chopping down the Amazon rainforest, which is what's happening, when you reduce biodiversity, the ecosystem becomes less stable. So within the gut, when we look at conditions like obesity or irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or autoimmune diseases, or mood disorders, anxiety or depression, or women's health issues, so endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, or men's health issues like erectile dysfunction, which by the way is the quickest way for me to get all the men's attention. If you look at these issues, what you discover is that in the gut there are changes that exist, and those changes are a reduction in the biodiversity. So biodiversity is really important. We want biodiversity within our gut. This is, if we were to zoom in and get super nerdy, this is actually giving you a picture of what this looks like. And so what we're seeing here is on the left, homeostasis, which means balance, okay? And this is what you want. And what we're seeing here is a wide mix of different types of microbes. The blue guys are good guys. They're anti-inflammatory. They want you to be healthy. The red guys, they're actually inflammatory microbes, but there's not many of them, and they really can't do much to hurt you, right? Because they're being dominated by the good guys. And so when you have this mix, this is a healthy gut, and the gut barrier ends up intact as a result of this. And one of the things that you see are these short-chain fatty acids. By the way, I'm going to come back to those in a moment. But on the flip side, this is dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the term that we use for an inflamed or unhealthy environment within the gut. Okay, so this is the bad side. This is where you don't want to be. Also could be referred to as leaky gut. You notice there's less of the blue good guys. And we're seeing a takeover by these red guys. And as a result of this, what ends up happening is you actually get breakdown of the barrier that surrounds the gut. This breakdown of the barrier allows things to get into the bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there. All right, so what's fascinating is that these microbes, they're so central to our health. What we've discovered is that they're intertwined. Think about this for a moment. Think about, what if I told you that there was this one part of your body that was connected to your digestion, your immune system, your metabolism, your hormones, your mood, your brain health, and the expression of your genetic code. This is what the gut is actually doing. The gut is connected to all of those things. Do I have any doctors in the room? Any doctors? Okay. I'm just going to say then, as a medical doctor, like that is everything that matters for human health, right? Think about that. This is all of the relevant stuff connected back to your gut. You are what your gut microbes eat. The food choices that you make can elevate your health very quickly, but if we consume the standard American diet, it can be problematic. And so this is a study that I was referring to with like your gut microbiome changes by the next day. This is a study by Lawrence David, just 10 people, but basically here's what they did. 5 days on a completely plant-based diet versus 5 days on a completely animal-based diet. Now this was published in 2014. This is not like carnivore versus vegan, right? This is just like literally from a scientific perspective. Can we take two polar extreme diets and see a difference in the microbiome And so you can see here that the calories are the same, the fat is different because of the animal-based diet. It's higher in fat, it's higher in protein, but the fiber content, 41.2 grams of fiber per day on the plant-based diet, 0 grams on the animal-based diet. So that's kind of what you would expect with all those things. And what we see is that there are dramatic changes in the microbiome that are occurring within 24 hours of the dietary change, including higher levels of these specific ones. This is like what they called out in the paper: Roseburia, Eubacterium rectali, and Fecalibacterium prosnitzii. Okay, this is on the plant-based diet. These specific microbes are completely anti-inflammatory. These are the exact microbes that you want more of to support your body and make these things, digestion, metabolism, immune system, hormones, mood, brain health, fall into alignment and work like a well-oiled machine. On the flip side, the animal-based diet had lower levels of these, what I would call short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, and additionally, we saw increased levels of Bilophila wadsworthii, Allostipes putridinus, and Bacteroides. Well, let's look at these microbes. Bilophila has been associated with appendicitis, abdominal abscesses, ulcerative colitis, type 2 diabetes, and fatty liver disease. Allostipes is associated with inflammatory bowel disease, colorectal cancer, depression. Bacteroides is associated with colorectal cancer and inflammatory bowel disease. That is not the kind of company that I want to keep. So, but the key here is that your diet changes within 24 hours, and it can change in a way that either promotes disease or protects you from disease. So, and there's this special connection that exists between the food choices that we make and the microbes, because basically anything that you put into your mouth, whether it's food or a supplement or a medication, it will come into contact with these microbes. In fact, we believe that these microbes are powerfully involved in the effects that you receive from medications. So like, why does a medication save one person's life and be life-threatening to another person? The answer is probably because of their microbiome. So when these microbes consume this soluble fiber that I've been talking about, they release these 3 molecules: acetate, propionate, and butyrate. These are the short-chain fatty acids. These things are so cool. These things get me so excited. Because they are the reason why, this is like right here, this is the reason why fiber is so good for us. Because without these things that come from fiber, fiber would just pass through our intestines and come out the other side. If we didn't have a microbiome, we would never get access to these short-chain fatty acids. But because we have a microbiome, our microbiome, basically I'm referring to the probiotics. Fiber is the prebiotic. You combine fiber with the probiotics that already live inside you. Like, you don't need to take a capsule to have probiotics. You already have them. They're there. All you got to do is feed them, which is what prebiotics are, food for the microbiome. When you feed the microbiome, these microbes will produce the postbiotics, which are the short-chain fatty acids that have an amazing effect on our health. These are the biggest deal in nutrition, and not enough people are talking about this, but I will say, people are starting to get into this more. But when you look at these things, short-chain fatty acids are involved in all facets of what I'm showing you on this screen. We could dig into every single one, I won't, but like literally, not just in your gut, but getting into your bloodstream and passing through your bloodstream to your brain, repairing the blood-brain barrier, preventing Alzheimer's disease, reducing inflammation, preventing Parkinson's. That's like on the opposite end of your body. You know what, I'm gonna skip this real quick. I want to talk about COVID-19 and the gut microbiome. So it's interesting. I suspected when COVID started, when the pandemic started, that there would be a connection between the gut and the virus. Because how do you explain the fact that there were people exposed to the virus that had like the sniffles, and yet some people this was a life-threatening thing? And so I had a very strong suspicion. I'm not going to read this whole email, but the last slide was an email that I sent to my publisher because my book was about to launch, and I had a lot of time on my hands. Our practice was closed. So anyway, where I expected that we would find something, and the answer is we did. That this was published in Gut, which is one of the top gastroenterology journals on the planet, in early 2021. And basically what they did is they looked at the gut microbiome changes that existed in people who were exposed to COVID. And what they found correlating with your COVID were that people who had COVID had higher levels of these microbes and lower levels of these microbes. Okay, so basically this was like a pattern that became even more intense and focused with escalating intensity of the symptoms that people would manifest. Now, I don't know if you caught it, but I just mentioned a minute ago on the plant-based diet, you get higher levels of fecal bacterium prosnitzii, higher levels of Eubacterium rectali, and I'm pretty sure I also said bifidobacteria on the plant-based diet. You get the exact things that you are missing here. So it led me, again, to believe that there should be evidence coming that a plant-based diet will protect us from COVID. The answer was yes. Actually, there were several studies. So here's the first study in the British Medical Journal where basically they looked at a group of physicians who were exposed in the hospital early in the pandemic. And this was before the existence of a vaccine, so no one was vaccinated. So it was like an authentic, like, all of these people are exposed. What happens? And what were you eating? And they looked at dietary patterns. And if you ate a plant-based diet, you were 73% less likely to get moderate to severe COVID-19. Think about that. That's amazing. On the flip side, if you were on a low-carb, high-protein diet, you were actually the most likely to get severe COVID. Because the problem with a keto is that fiber is a carb. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? This is the issue. So you're getting rid of the fiber and you're replacing it with high-fat foods, and most people who do keto in the United States, their high-fat foods aren't avocados and nuts. So if you were to compare a keto diet to a plant-based diet, you were nearly 400% more likely to end up in the hospital with moderate to severe COVID if you were on that diet compared to a plant-based diet. So, and by the way, plant-based diet in this second study, also, you were less likely to be diagnosed with COVID if you were on a plant-based diet, and you were less likely to get severe COVID if you were on a plant-based diet. So I want to give you things that you can take home and apply to your life, to the life of the people that you care about. You can talk to your kids about this stuff. You can talk to your grandkids about this stuff. These are simple rules that I think we all need. Here are the rules. First of all, every plant has fiber, and it's unique types of fiber. So like the fiber that's in a bean is not the same as the fiber in an apple. And so those different types of plants are going to feed different families of microbes. Every individual plant will feed unique families of microbes. But what's the key to a healthy microbiome? Biodiversity. Thank you. So if we want biodiversity, then we shouldn't be restricting our diet or eliminating foods, because that's reducing the diversity in our diet. And again, diversity in the diet feeds diversity in the microbiome. Instead, what we need to do is focus on diversity of plants. It's a simple concept, but the issue is that our food system is not going to do this for you. You have to do this for yourself, right? Our food system, if you walk into your supermarket, 75% of the calories in there come from 3 plants: wheat, corn, and soy, right? So we have to be the ones to buck that trend, break that pattern, and it has to come from yourself. You walk into the supermarket, you hear my voice. Diversity of plants. You're in the kitchen cooking dinner, I pop up on your shoulder. Diversity of plants. You're sitting down at the kitchen table, getting ready to put some food on your plate. Who do you hear? Diversity of plants. Dr. B in the house. If there's one thing you take away from this talk, I want you to take that away. And I want you to apply it to your life. I want you to apply it to the lives of your family, the people that you care about. This is not just something that I'm making up and that I hey, that makes sense, that's cool, good idea, Dr. B. This is scientifically proven. In the largest study to date called the American Gut Project, the largest study to date allowing us to make connections between the health of our microbiome, which hopefully I've convinced you is really important, and the choices that we make in terms of diet and lifestyle. And in this study with more than 11,000 people, Rob Knight stood at the podium. This was, I believe, 2017 at Digestive Disease Week. I was in the front row. I was a big fan of Rob Knight. And he said the single greatest predictor of a diverse, healthy gut microbiome is the diversity of plants in our diet. And this is a study where they're not trying to tell us that plants are healthy. They're just analyzing the data. And the plants rise to the surface because they are the dominant, supreme factor in health. By the way, a second thing. This is a study done by a few friends of mine, the Sonnenbergs. Their book is over there, by the way. It's a great book. So Justin and Erica Sonnenberg, they're at Stanford University, along with Christopher Gardner. And what they did in this study is they added fermented food to their diet. Raise your hand if you eat fermented food once in a while. All right, keep your hand up if you eat fermented food every day. Okay. Keep your hand up if you eat fermented food more than once a day. Okay, so we got one person, all right? In this study, this is really cool. They added 6 serves. Now, just bear with me here, okay? I don't want to lose you right off the bat. They added 6 serves of fermented food to their diet, and in just 10 weeks, transformed their microbiome to be more biodiverse. And with that, lower measures of inflammation, which is what we want. Now, does it have to be 6? I don't think it does. I think if you have fermented food at every meal, a little serve, that's all you need. And there's a lot of options. So someone asked me, is it okay to do plant-based yogurt, plant-based kefir? And the answer is yes. Pay attention to the sugar. Try to get one that's a lower sugar option. But we want these fermented foods in our diet. They are really important. And I'm happy to talk about them more in the question and answer session. So the solution is not restriction, it's abundance, it's diversity. And in the American Gut Project, by the way, the magic number was 30 plants per week. That's the magic number. But here's what I say. If you are consuming 5 plants a week, which you're probably not, but if you are, don't worry. I was consuming less than that back in 2012, right? You can change your diet, and it's one day at a time. And it's small choices, and it's one meal. You don't need to feel the pressure of 30 plants a week. Dr. B's, breathing down my neck while I'm in the supermarket. It's not a heavy breathing diversity of plants. It's a nice casual diversity of plants. This is what we want. So just look for more. And any progress that you make, I celebrate that progress. So every meal is an opportunity. Like on the left, that's spaghetti and tomato sauce. I mean, I guess 2 plants? You can add vegetables. My kids love it. Call your grandkids into the room, into the kitchen with you. Put them to work. Have them throwing stuff in the sauce. Ask them who made the sauce. They're very proud of themselves. And I guarantee you they're more likely to eat it if they helped you to cook it. Think of diversity plants as you enter the supermarket. And then build healthy habits. When you build healthy habits, that little choice that you made, hey, I'm gonna have a smoothie for breakfast once a day. That little choice, but you're doing it every day, that has massive results over the course of weeks, months, a year. And gamify it, have fun, have a competition. Whoever's at home with you, hang something on the fridge and see who can get the most plants this week. So the bottom line is that plants have fiber, okay? Fiber is not hard to find, it's in plants. Fruits, vegetables, whole grain, seeds, nuts, and legumes, and mushrooms. Fiber is the preferred food of our gut microbes. They love it, they thrive when you feed them fiber. It's sad to me that 95% of Americans are not feeding their microbes. Every single plant has its own unique types of fiber to feed a unique mix of microbes. So we want to feed as many microbes as possible. The way that we do that is by eating a diversity of plants. And that's the ultimate diet. And I am, by the way, not the only person out there banging this drum. Tim Spector in the UK, who's one of the most published scientists in the world, is talking about this. Megan Rossi, Alan Desmond, who's a plant-based gastroenterologist, is talking about this. The reason why is because we're all looking at the same science. It's the science. It's not just making stuff up. The science is clear. This is the way to eat for better health. A biodiverse microbiome fueled by fiber is, in my opinion, the strongest tool we have for human health. And it is never too late to start because you will feel the benefits very quickly. I promise you that. So there's so many other things that I could talk about. I could talk all night. I would love to answer some questions. These are my books. That is my, I have an email list where I send out like study breakdowns. There was a new study that came out. I don't know if is anyone on my email list? Okay, so I sent this email out on Monday that was about a brand new study where they fed people a microbiome-friendly diet with fiber and resistant starches. And it was quite interesting because people started pooping calories out. And they lost weight because they were pooping calories out. So anyway, that's my email list, my courses, and my social media if you're into that kind of thing. And I thank you.